1, 2. I don't see the red light.
No red light.
Are we on?
You're on.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us. I'm Dave Silkin from DSG Metro. We're here at our showroom in Plainview. It's going to be a great day. I'm very excited about this. About 17 years ago, we had the opportunity to become representatives for MSE Audio. And if you don't know who that is, MSE Audio is a company behind Phase Tech, Induction Dynamics, Solid Drive, Soundtube, Soundsphere, and Darts. One of my favorite things. Darts is a digital audio reference theaters, and of course, Rockustics. The brains, the genius behind all that is a guy I met at that meeting 17 years ago. His name is Hecht. Ken has become one of the most influential people in our business and in our career. The contributions that the Hecht family has made to the audio business are immeasurable, and we're going to tell you all about that today. If you're listening through a pair of speakers, there's a good chance that something that Ken or his family has done, either recently or in the past, has influenced that speaker. They've had influence on every speaker manufacturer in the country, in the world, and he's got a great story. So without further ado, my friend, Ken Hecht.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate you having me out here. And welcome, everybody. So I guess we ought to start at the beginning. The beginning for us is 1955, and well, clicker's not working. And the first speaker that our company made. So my father started the company in 1955, and at the time he was working for a projector company, and they installed projectors all over the country. And he happened to be in charge of installing the projectors at Radio City Music Hall, and they had, a really, really good sound system. So he installed the projectors, went really well. They liked him a lot, actually gave him a pass, a lifetime pass for Radio City Music Hall for any event they had. And he used it for many, many years until he lost it. And then they denied ever giving it to him, so that was the end of that. But anyway, the company that he was working for, the employees went out on strike, and the company went out of business, and he decided, what am I going to do now? So he decided, since he enjoyed audio so much, he would design speakers. I mean, really, anyone can design speakers. So the first one he did was the Premier 500, and that was actually based on the same components that they used at Radio City for their sound system, the Altec Lansing Voice of the Theater. So at that time, he was producing one speaker a week on average, and you only needed one because everything was mono. You didn't have stereo. And there goes my clicker again. So we won't use it. So he put some more models into the line, and this is an ad from 1956 or 7, somewhere in there, and you can see the price of the speakers, but at that time that was a lot of money. And then my father always thought that any advertising, any promotion was good promotion. So he kind of in 1957 put together an ad that was kind of out there, I guess, at the time. And he got a lot of notoriety from it, and most of it not good. So he got actually hate mail. Pretty risque for the time. And but it got him a lot of press. So we got some reviews, and different magazines. These are from the late 50s again. And because of the reviews, he got invited out to a company in Long Island, and they were interested in a speaker of their own. And so he went out there, met with them, and they told him approximately what they wanted. So he went back to New Jersey, designed the speaker, brought it back out, and showed it. And they said to him, well, we like the speaker a lot, but if we'd really like to bring it to a show and see what kind of reaction we get, and if it's good, we'll buy it from you. And my father said, well, I'd love to let you do that, but I actually have another customer interested in this speaker, and if you don't want to give me a PO now, they might take it. It might not be available. And so they thought about it. and they said, oh, all right, we'll give you a PO for 1,000 speakers. Now, if you remember in the beginning, he was making 1 speaker a week, and really up until this point, that's all he was making. He had no factory, no employees, no money. He was a speaker manufacturer. But he had a PO for 1,000 speakers. So he went to the bank, showed him the PO, and like any good bank, they loan you $30,000 on a PO. And they did. So he went out, rented a facility, hired employees, and that year he made actually 10,000 speakers for Fisher Radio. This next shot is a early trade show in the 50s. And at that time, like they do now, the manufacturers band together with complementary equipment and they show in booths. And at that time, he showed with a few different companies, but one of his partners was Saul Morantz from Morantz. And they traveled all over to all the different shows, and he had the electronics, my father had the speakers, they had a cartridge company. So that first speaker that he made for Fisher, it was Fisher Electronics, is right here. So he decided at that time, when he started building this stuff for Fisher, that maybe making branded speakers and selling one a week was not a great business idea. But OEM, where you can get orders for 1,000, 10,000 a year, that was a good business. So he gave up building his own brand and just started doing OEM. And here's some shots of the Fisher speaker. Now you'll notice the Fisher speaker plant, all the employees and the building. And if you see the banner on the front doors of the building just above it, you'll notice that it's missing United Speaker System, which is our company. So Fisher just decided they would call our company their company, and nobody would know that they weren't building the speakers. And these are actually all our employees. So in '67, he got a patent for the soft dome tweeter. It actually took him about 4 years to get the patent, because every time he sent the application down to Washington to get the patent approved, the patent examiner said, that can't work. So we're going to reject the patent just on the grounds that it can't work. And so they kept reapplying, and finally in '67, my father, his patent attorney, jumped in a car, went down to Washington, met with the patent examiner with a signal generator and a soft dome tweeter, turned it on, and they got the patent that day. So because of the patent, it was licensed actually through Philips in the Netherlands. Philips became the licensor for all the different manufacturers, and he licensed it to pretty much everybody in the world. So he had 2 ways you can do the license. One, you could just pay a royalty and make your own soft dome tweeters, or he could build the speakers for you. And a lot of companies opted to have the speakers built for them by us. So here's a couple slides of different speakers we were making at the time. Then in '79, he decided that he would branch out and we would create our own brand. And I was just joining the company around then. And so we created a brand called AES, and we brought it to, did a big press release and showing of it in New York City, and had a lot of people come and everything. And we, had high hopes for it, thought it was going to do great, and it really flopped. We had some dealers around the New York area, and that was about it. So we gave up on AES, and a few years later, the then president of Yamaha, or vice president of Yamaha, a guy named Stuart Greenberg, Stu, if you're out there, we decided we would do something together. Stu wanted to have his own company, and we wanted to launch another brand. And so we decided we would jointly do it. He would become our distributor throughout the US, and we would create the brand FaceTech. And that's what we did. And because of his relationships with all the dealers in the country, we went from no dealers to about 70 of the best dealers in the country overnight. And the brand was very successful, and that was the launch of Phase Technology. So here's a few slides of just the brands we were making up until that point. So the company, United Speaker, has always prided itself as being as a vertically integrated company, meaning that we make everything. Everything that goes into a speaker, pretty much. So here's some shots. We even wind our own voice coils, coat our own voice coil wire with a very high temperature thermosetting adhesive, which is really one of the best types of adhesives you can use on a voice coil. Manufacture the woofers, cabinets. We have a cabinet shop. We have a paint booth. We do all types of finishes. So we're really one of the few vertically integrated manufacturers left in the United States in speakers. So this slide is kind of we call Phase Tech first, United Speaker first. And there's a few things on here that, you kind of say, why didn't we patent those? And one of them, first one is ferrofluid, widely used in pretty much all high-frequency drivers now. We were the first ones for that. Neodymium. Everyone uses neodymium now in speakers. We were the people that pioneered and invented how to use neodymium in speakers. The dog ear mounting system for CIs. If you've ever mounted a CI in a wall, most of them have these dog ears that flip out and tighten down. Again, we were the first. And many other things. I think as a company as a whole, we probably have close to 70 patents in loudspeakers. So that brings us to why we're actually here today. So I'm gonna talk about a couple things. Talk about darts and theater sound in general. So we've created a website called Theater Sound, MSC Audio Theater Sound. And through that website, we're going to help design systems that work. And I'll get back to that work in a minute. But first, I want to take you through darts. Because darts was kind of the beginning of this, and it kind of explains a lot of the technology behind what we did. So darts answers the question that I think every dealer, customer, and even manufacturer has. And that really is, how is their speakers going to sound once you install them into a customer's room? The big unknown is always the room. When you walk in a room, you can tell right off the bat whether it's a big room, a small room, very live room, very dead room, just by hearing it. You could have your eyes closed and you'll know when you walk into that room, you get the impression of what it is. So every room has its own sonic signature. And so whenever you put a speaker into a room, that sonic signature is applied to that speaker, and every speaker sounds different. And you can tweak it, you can move it around, you can do a lot of different treatments to the walls, but the room puts its mark on that speaker. So we wanted to design something and develop something, a home theater system, that took that out of the equation, basically. So in order to do that, we had to first start with something that was good, that we thought was the best. So we designed the most dynamic, most cohesive theater system we could. Then we had to make sure that every component in that system sounded exactly alike. So we actually calibrate each driver in that system to a half a dB of our reference response. So when it leaves our factory, it's really the most exact speaker you can buy. I mean, it's about as precise as you can get. And then when it's put in a room, it puts its own sonic signature back on the speaker systems and the sound system, and every system sounds different. So we had to get the room out of the equation. So the first system we did in 2004, we brought to a CEDIA, which is an industry trade show, and showed it to a bunch of our dealers, and they loved it. They thought it sounded really, really good. And I took them through the calibration processes, which was something that we had developed ourselves We spent about 2 years on it, and it was a very complicated system, let's say, and it took a long time to do. And so we showed it, everyone heard it, thought it sounded really good, and I went up to one of our dealers who was an early adopter of almost all new technologies, and I said, so what do you think? And he said, you know, that's one of the best sounding systems I've ever heard. And I said, oh, well, great, so you're going to sell it? And he said, no. And I said, why? And he said, because I don't have anyone in my company that can do what you just did. And I said, well, we have a way of tying into their computers, and we're going to help them walk it through it. We're going to train them on doing it. And he said, and then they're going to leave my company in 6 months, and I'm going to have to start over again. He said, I just can't afford to do something like that. And I said, oh, well, I didn't really know where to go from there, I guess. But he had the solution. He said, a friend of mine is just developing a new system. He's at University of Southern California, and he and his students and another professor are developing a system that we think would work really, really well with what you're doing. And I said, okay. So got back from CEDIA, and I get a phone call from Tom Holman, the TH and THX. And I said, oh, okay. So we started talking. I flew out to California, met with them, and they showed me what they were doing. And we went into, this is a while ago, but I got a still vivid memory of this. We went into this room that was pretty much all concrete. It was a square room, like the worst acoustics you could possibly have. And they played these little speakers for me. And if you're listening, sorry, but they didn't sound very good. But they said, get up and walk around the room. And I did. When I got up and walked around the room, and they sounded the same wherever I was, pretty much, for all intents and purposes. And I'm thinking to myself, that can't be happening, because rooms have acoustics, and wherever you walk in the room, it changes. But it did. It sounded equally, the same pretty much all the way around. So we started talking about how they were doing it, and I thought it was fantastic. So we decided then and there pretty much that we were going to partner on this thing. So we went, left there, and for about the next 6 months, we developed our own version of what became Odyssey, multi-EQ. And we launched it with them. The following year, we did some road shows around the country, starting, I think, in New York, and launched Odyssey and Darts at pretty much the same time. And let me take you through how it works, because it's interesting. So you have a room, 4 different seats in the room, measure the same speaker at all 4 seats, and you're going to get a different frequency response. So these are the frequency responses. You got a position 1, nice hold at 300 hertz. Position 2, still a hold, but not very much. 3, no hold. 4, no hold. So let's say we correct for position 1, and we take an equalizer and we flatten out the response at position 1. Well, we've just made position 2, 3, and 4 much worse. So we've gotten 1 seat that sounds pretty good and 3 seats that sound lousy. And there's a lot of calibration systems out there that take multiple microphones and use what we call an optimization program. And they would average those 4 seating positions to get kind of the best average, so that all 4 seats sound okay. But none of them sound good, none of them sound terrible. Okay, that's a decent approach. But the approach that we took was a little bit different. We looked at the time domain. We looked at what it takes for a sound to get to you from the speakers, and then what it takes for the sounds to bounce off the walls and get to you from the speakers. And that's always going to take longer than the initial sound, because the initial sound has less of a path to get to you. It's a shorter distance. So this is an impulse. An impulse contains all the frequencies in the audio band, 20 to 20K, and instantaneously almost pulses one way, and it excites the speaker. So this is amplitude or energy, and this scale is time. So this is 0 time, and that's the time it takes for the sound to get to the microphone, the first sound. So that's the direct sound. So then essentially you have the tweeter moving up, out, and the tweeter moving back in, which goes negative, and then time. So here's the tweeter sounds, and then the woofer takes longer to reproduce lower frequencies. The wavelengths are much longer. And so all those other up and down impulses have to be reflections because they're taking longer to get to you. So they're not part of the initial sound anymore. So what if you could get rid of those? Then all you'd be hearing is the direct sound from the speaker. And if all you're hearing is the direct sound from the speaker, pretty much every room's going to sound the same now. And there's the after. So you can see tweeter going one way, tweeter going the other way, low frequencies getting reproduced, and the reflected energy is much lower. It's almost gone. Before, after running multi-EQ calibration. So if we can get rid of the reflections in the walls and the room, that's what really makes the frequency response look different at all those different seats, because it's the influence of the room on the sound that causes the dips and peaks in the frequency response. The speakers don't magically change. And so here's the after. So now you can see that all four locations are pretty much the same. So now we've gotten the room, for the most part, out of the equation, and that's how we make every system sound pretty much the same, no matter where it is or what the room is. Now, if you have different degrees of reflectivity in the room, the results are going to be better or, really, really good. But in any case, even in the most live rooms, it's going to sound really, really good. So after you run the calibration, this is a printout you can do from the software, and shows all the positions of the speakers in the room. This is a 7.1 system, and the before and after frequency responses. So the heart of a DART system is the DP4000. DP4000 is 16 channels of amplification. Each channel has its own DSP. We're doing the crossovers, time alignment, phase correction, all in the digital domain prior to amplification. And so each driver in a DART system is hooked directly to an amp channel, which means there's nothing in the chain to affect the sound quality. It gets the purest signal you possibly can. There's a connection on the back for a microphone, a connection on the front with a USB connector to connect to a computer that you can run the calibration with. So that brings me to the MSE Theater Sound Designer. All of this was really based on what we learned through DARTs. And it's a web-based program that you put in some information about your room and about what your goals are, and it will spit out systems that match and will work in that size room. So there's DARTs, which is all active, and then there's PC and CI being in-wall, PC being box speakers, that are all on the website, and you can build systems with. So there's many factors that go into designing a theater sound system. It's not a trivial matter. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and there's a lot of really good dealers that know what they're doing, understand this, and put a lot of time and planning into making really good sound systems. What we're doing with the theater designer is we're going to help on the audio side of this. We're not working with the video. We're not necessarily working with the seats or anything like that. We're working with the audio side of the theater. So there's three criteria, really, general criteria for making a good sounding theater. Speakers got to play loud and go low. You have to have balanced neutral sound. And they must be matched in both frequency and phase. So the theater designer asks for input. So it asks for how far is the reference listening position from the screen speakers. So how far from the screen to where I guess the person paying the bills sits. Maximum SPL, how many subs and surrounds you're going to use, the types of speakers, meaning in-wall, custom box, in-room, nice-looking speakers, and then there's customization that you can do to the system. So let me just take you through the other criteria. So balanced neutral sound. People that were into stereo audio probably remember West Coast sound, East Coast sound, speakers that were good for jazz, speakers that are good for rock and classical. Really, maybe that's not the best idea for speakers. Speakers should be neutral. They shouldn't be telling you or changing how the speaker, how the engineer engineered and mixed the mix for the audio. They shouldn't change that. However the mix was done should be reproduced as closely as possible by the speakers that you're buying. So our speakers, we don't adhere to any of that. We just build the most neutral sounding speakers we can. We don't want the speaker to affect what the sound quality is from the mix or change it. So all Phase Tech and CI speakers have the same target response, have the same woofers, use the same soft dome tweeters. All Dart speakers, same thing, same reference curves, use the same drivers, and again, same high frequency reproducers. So frequency and phase. We match all the Dart speakers, as I said before, to plus or minus a dB and a half. I mean, a half a dB. That's unheard of. I mean, that's crazy. You can't hear that. PC and CI to 1.5 dB. Still extremely tight spec, very hard to hear unless it's over a really broad frequency range. And then we use something that we call absolute phase crossovers. And we developed absolute phase crossovers back actually when surround sound first started coming out and people started really buying the stuff, early 90s. And the thought was, when you have a left and right speaker as a stereo system, and then you want to build that into a surround sound system, you add a center channel, you add some surround speakers. They might or might not be from the same brand, but even if they're from the same brand, you had no way of guaranteeing that the left and right speakers were in phase with the center speaker throughout the audio bandwidths. In fact, in most cases, it probably wasn't. So if you've ever listened to two out-of-phase speakers, it's kind of uncomfortable. The sound is very dispersed. It's almost, well, I guess uncomfortable is the best word for it. But if you use that in a theater, then any sounds traveling from a left channel to a center channel to a right channel, when it's going across, it's going to come to a point where the sound is not adding up properly anymore. It's getting reduced or it's getting increased. And it just screws up the cohesiveness of the theater. So absolute phase crossovers actually handle that. They means that electrically and acoustically, all the drivers in those systems are going to be in phase with each other over the audio band. And then Darts actually takes it one step further by looking at the room and helping to calibrate the responses in the room itself. So now we get to the theater designer. So let's start building a system, I guess. Okay. So the first thing you decide is how far away are the seats from the screen area. So you have three choices right now: 7, 5.5 meters, and 4 meters. So you decide that. Decide how loud you want it to play. We only have two choices right now for all our speakers: loud and really loud. Loud is 102 dB. That's pretty loud for any room, and I would imagine that most people don't listen anywhere near that level. 105 dB, that's, you know, high-end theater levels. That's THX theater levels. Very, very loud. Number of surround speakers. So for the basic system, is it going to be a 5.1, 7.1, 9.1 system? That's where you decide what the basic system is going to be. And then speaker type. So for these choices right now, on this particular setup, you can only choose custom box or in-wall. But on most setups, you can also choose in-room. So there's three different choices, but it will only give you the ones that we have packages for. And then you click Find System, and it comes up with all the different systems that we make that will meet those criteria. And the important thing here is that these systems are matched. They're designed to have the same frequency response, have the same phase response, to be matched for the whole theater as a whole. So after you choose which speaker you want, let's say we choose the DCB 535 system. It will give you options for the types of surrounds that match up to the front screen channels, the in-ceiling speakers that match up to it, and the subwoofers that match up to it. And then you choose how many you want of those. In the surround speakers, you can only choose up to what you chose in the first one. So if you chose 2, 4, or 6, it will let you choose 2, 4, or 6. But for the ceiling speakers, you can put in, 4, 6, whatever you want. And subs also, you can add up to as many subs as you want in the room. More subs is always better, gives you much more even response. And then it will summarize the system for you. We'll give you the specs on the system, and you'll notice that the specs are a little bit different than probably what you're used to. Most companies, when they give you specs for speakers, they give you sensitivity, which is how loud it will play at 1 watt. They give you impedance. They give you amplifier power. What's the recommended power for those speakers. We look at it a little bit differently. We don't really care what sensitivity it is. What we really care about is how loud is it going to play, because we want to know it's going to play at that 102 dB or 105 dB. So what we're telling you is the max SPL. And again, we do that a little bit differently. Most companies would calculate it. So you would say, well, this speaker is 87 dB efficient. I've got a 100 watt amp. 100 watts gives me 20 dB, so my speaker will play at 107 dB. Maybe. Maybe that speaker can't handle that 100 watts. Maybe that speaker heats up and starts compressing when it gets near that 100 watts. You don't know. You don't know. So what we do is we actually measure that. We actually have a way that measures max SPL over long term. So we know those speakers are going to play at these levels over the long term. And then in the case of, for darts, it's always 250 watts because that's the amp. In the case of PC and CI, we'll tell you what amplifier power you need to create that max SPL long term. So some of the technology that we use behind darts, we went through a lot of it already. 28 millimeter patented soft domes, a little bit larger than your normal 1-inch soft domes, gives you more power, more dynamics. The in-walls, hybrid bass extending back boxes, give you much lower frequencies for in-wall speakers than normal back boxes. In fact, they'll probably go down approximately 1 octave lower. So if in a normal box you go down to 80 hertz, with these types of boxes, you'll go down to 40 hertz. Unicell acoustic treatment, which is really a powerful tool. So Unicell acoustic treatment surrounds our tweeters in walls and in some of our box speakers. And the biggest enemy of a tweeter is the cabinet. Because tweeter, the frequencies are so small that the sounds tend to run along the baffle surface, and instead of coming out at you at one point, they come out at you at all the points across the baffle surface. So in an in-wall, that gets even worse because then you got the wall as your baffle surface. So Unicell acoustic treatment surrounds the tweeter, and it absorbs all the sounds that come off the tweeter, so that all you hear is the direct sound from the tweeter, again making it the clarity is much better, intelligibility is much better sounding tweeter. And then Phase Tech Technologies, the PC and CI, a lot of the same technologies. So darts comes in 4 different types. We've got custom built-in, in-wall, in-room, and then flight. Flight is made as an on-wall type of product. It's only about 4 inches deep. And I'll show you some pictures of what they look like. So there's the custom box made to go behind screens and cabinets, and can also be customized in any shape and color. So if you have a location where a speaker will not fit, one of our standard speakers won't fit, we'll build you a custom one. These are the in-walls. The good-looking in-room ones, high-gloss finishes. We have an angled speaker which can be used as an LCR above the screen. So let's say you have a big screen like this. You can't put speakers behind it. This thing's solid. But you have a ceiling that's open, so you put the 3 speakers in the ceiling, and because of the way the design works, you really can't tell that the sound's coming from the ceiling. It still sounds like it's coming from the screen. Also great speaker for effects, height speakers, or overhead speakers. And then we have a dedicated in-ceiling speaker for overhead speakers, and again, all of them are matched, so you can be sure that they're going to work together well. And then flight, the on-wall. And then for phase and CI, it's in-wall, in-room, and flight. So similar products, similar looks. CI 140, which is the PC version or CI version, Phase Tech version of the darts in-ceiling LCR with the angles. And then the custom box with the high gloss finishes. And that's about the end of my presentation. So I want to thank everyone for coming and everyone that is viewing this online. Thanks.
Questions, Mike? Yeah, no, there was definitely some cool stuff. And one of the things I have to be honest is I really appreciate how you present the information on the speakers, because, I think we went from a long time, everybody was told, like, you care about wattage, which is, I don't know, it doesn't really even tell you anything. And then even they were like, no, sensitivity is really the key. That's what we're supposed to understand, which also really didn't tell you much. But the way you're breaking it out, understanding, no, this is how everything is supposed to go together, and then being honest about it, because I know we had done a show, Bergen County show, and we were raising money for a hospital, and we had a theater there, and I had another brand speaker there that was supposed to be ultra high-end, playing for an entire week nonstop, and we blew out a tweeter every 2 days. And they had to continuously ship us this, and it was one of the craziest things I've ever experienced. Now, I am a proud owner of the Induction, and I think I've played my system for weeks at probably way higher SPLs, loving the speakers, best speakers I've ever really heard. And I love that you have that honest figure, because those are real figures that you can continuously have fun with it, really hear it, and have that true sound. I really hope we get other brands. What brought you to start moving in that direction?
Well, we've been doing this since the 90s. We haven't come out and changed our specs to be like this back then, but we've always been doing this. Back when we first started doing the absolute phase crossovers, and we realized what people were doing with surround systems and how they were really messing them up and not making, adding more speakers but not making it better sounding. That's when we started doing it. We started looking at all the different things that went into the speakers or the theater to make a really good sounding sound system. And the ingredients were always the same. You know, the phase, we recognized that early on, frequency response, and power handling. So we've always had extensive power testing to make sure our speakers would handle the maximum levels that we thought they would play at or should play at. And you know, now we've just taken it to a little bit more bigger level, higher level with the theater designer by actually telling the dealers which ones work the best together, which ones really match up the best together. And you brought up the induction brand. That's one of our higher end, best sounding speakers that we make. And that's going to be added to the theater designer too. And we've already begun doing testing on those for Max SPL. And I got to tell you, those things play loud and sound great.
I'm a fan. You know, having a pair myself, I know I've compared my theater. I'm blessed that I live in a community where a lot of people have what they thought, unfortunately now what they thought was a high-end system, but they would hear my system, and it really changed like what it was supposed to sound like, how, and the fact that your speakers are almost, they are like studio quality, where they're not adding on, they're giving you what they actually were supposed to give you, very natural. And even in a setup where my theater is very unconventional, I have a glass wall, you know, fireplace, and they walk in and they hear it and usually people are like, no, this isn't gonna sound amazing. I'm like, wait a minute, this is like NASCAR. Sit down, feel it, and you will be blown. And the sound that reproduces, you can see it. Now, we have another system where, you know, the actual accountant for Crestron came to us and they were like, we really need this person to have something special and we want something amazing. So we thought darts right away. We were like, we got to give you darts. It's got to be an amazing theater. You're special. You know, we're True Blue Crestron. We have to do something special for you. And it was great because we brought them here, and I'm talking like an hour and a half, hour and 45 for them to drive here. We left them with the family living, like kind of living with the theater here, and I think they added a 0 to the quote, and you know, but the family is very happy. Now, you would think darts is here, but darts is actually international, because I have friends in the UK that are also, so the product is everywhere. We're international, as I'm saying. You can get this anywhere in the world.
Yeah, we have distribution in most major countries in the world, yeah.
And at the highest levels, I know your Jay, I think, is the rep in the UK, and we see darts going out, and the way it calibrates and the way you can put it in, you can put it in anything, and it sounds perfect.
That's the beauty behind the dart system. You know, no matter what the room is, it's pretty much going to sound the same and always have the same performance levels. Again, it doesn't matter what, I shouldn't say it doesn't matter what the size is. Yes, you can get to a size where we can no longer meet that 105 dB SPL. But for almost all home theaters and small theaters, you know, 20, 25 seat theaters, darts is great.
Now, when you start, you know, it's easy. I don't want to say easy. It's not, even at the highest levels. But the common Joe, like the everyday person that wants a theater, sometimes feels left out in this. And, you know, I can brag or whatever about my own blah, 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 and induct, but the common person, there is a price point. There is, and that's why I always try to tell people, like, look, I get it. It all looks expensive, but no. There is a price point, and I think that's the beauty about the brand, is that you have something for, you know, for one flavor, but then there is always other flavors. So even at a lower price point, there are phenomenal products. Am I correct?
Sure. And the phase technology CI and PC are good examples of that. So you don't have to spend a fortune to get a really, really good sounding home theater system. You know, one that you know is going to play at the levels you want it to, go as deep as you want it to, have the impact you want it to, and still have the cohesiveness of a high-end theater. The CI and the PC models are perfect. And you can match them up to, you know, a good quality receiver, 150 watt, 200 watt per channel receiver, and you'll have a great theater.
even a price point that, say, your builder contractor could probably even be happy with at a, building spec. Say you're building out a development and a developer is thinking, hey, I need to buy, a few hundred speakers. I'm looking at this spec. This has been something that you've been able to work around and make work for someone. Am I correct?
Yeah, and so the designer's just starting. So right now it has, starts at our CI series, the 100 series, and the PC models. So they're not the most inexpensive speakers that we make, but they're certainly not expensive. But this is only the beginning. So as we keep adding stuff to the designer, we're going to be adding more parameters and more systems that move down in price and move up in price. So this is just the beginning. So keep an eye on it, and we'll be adding more and more as time goes.
Now, I know I keep hitting you with questions, but I have induction at home. I have my IDs. I love them. And I've always loved darts. And I'm like, how do I get to marry the two? I have other amps, and it's almost like I'm cheating. I'm not supposed to. I know there's probably more in them. Are we ever going to see maybe an induction amp? Maybe something like that for us?
Maybe. MSC Audio has a lot of brands under its umbrella, and we've got 7 brands. Some in the commercial area, some in the residential area, and some that kind of cross over in between. And we're working on, I don't want to give away the future, but we are working on amplifiers in some of the other brands that could very, very easily work extremely well, in the residential market.
Now, you've always seemed to be this, revolutionary and always came out with product. And I remember before the pandemic, you guys had sent me some Dante speakers. I remember talking to people, and they were like, what language are you talking about? I'm like, yeah, man, network cable goes to the speaker. It makes sound. They're like, what? Fast forward today, AES67 is on everything, network everything, and, you just seem to always have your finger on the pulse of what's coming. Is there something that, you want to tell us? Maybe, did the aliens tell you what's coming next, So maybe we want to know?
No.
It was worth an effort, Oh.
No, we're always working on exciting new things, one of our company's taglines is lead or follow. And that's what we like to do. We like to lead. We like to be at that, cutting edge of new technologies. And, one of the other things that we brought to DSG and to show to, their integrators and dealers is to give them a glimpse of where we think residential is going. And so we brought, like you were talking about, our all IP-based audio system here with touch screens and easel controls, just to give you a glimpse of where we think home audio is going. Commercial's already there. Everything's on the network now. And we think home audio, everything's going to be on the network, from the speakers to every source that you have in the house. And it's going to be, come to the point where the dealers and integrators, if a customer's having a problem, they don't have to get up from their chair. They can just tie into the system, see where the problem is, fix it, change the routings. If somebody can't control their, forgets how to turn the system on and change inputs, again, just a phone call, tie into the system, and they can show them how to do it remotely. And so we think that's where home audio is going. And as I said, commercial for the most part is there already, but we think home audio is going to be there in the next few years.
What are some of the advantages to having speakers on your network?
Well, if you got so that's the last frontier. A lot of electronics is already internet-based. You can tie into it, but the speakers, which is what we call an endpoint, typically aren't. And what that means is that once you get to an amplifier, that's really where all control ends. So by adding speakers onto the network, you have control down to an individual speaker in an individual room, where if you wanted that speaker to just play audio instead of all 4 speakers in that room, you could. If you wanted to change the EQ on that speaker, if the speaker's tweeter goes out, it can tell you that the tweeter's out and notify you that there's an issue. I mean, there's so many advantages to having visibility of the whole system from where you're at,
Rack
especially
space.
As they get more and more complicated.
No, the fact that we can reduce the amount of rack space, we're all moving green. We see more solar solutions that have battery backups where we need to manage every square inch and the amount of power consumption and the way we communicate, and high available instant gratification is a realer thing today than it has ever been. And I think those of us either embrace it or they can like kind of see themselves out. And the reality is your product is forever doing that. And you can, you know, kind of, you can. I remember the first day I got my speakers asking us honest question. And it was like, hey, do I need to kind of break them in? And they were like, dude, drive it like you stole it. I was like, all right. So I'm like, okay. And, you know, my speakers are played loud often. And I show my kids what good audio is. My children know it is. My little daughter, 3 years old, she knows what it is. And they see the difference, and they respect what good sound, and they can hear it. It's crazy where they're like, yeah, this is not the same. And it's like, no, it's not the same. And the product delivers for long periods. But seeing IP as becoming a bigger thing, I think with green, now we can reduce the amount of power consumption, the amount of racks that are there, because amps eat up tremendous amount of power. And not having to spend that we look at apartments in the city, like the benefits just keep adding on and on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're right, and that's another advantage of having everything on the network. It's really low power, so it's PoE powered, our IP speakers, so the amplifiers are housed right into them, which is a much more efficient way of doing things than having a separate amplifier, speaker wire, and passive crossovers in the speaker. So much more efficient, takes less power to drive them. Still play extremely loud, and they sound better because the amplifiers are directly coupled to the speaker. The drivers, individual drivers in the speaker. You have no passive components in the way. And so from that standpoint too, and we were involved in a hotel that went up recently, that their goal was to make as much of that hotel PoE powered that they possibly could. And one of the things, you know, that drew us into the thing was our PoE powered speakers, our IP based speakers. But they have pretty much everything from AC to lighting to the controls for the elevators, maybe not the power to move them up and down, but the controls for them. It's all run by PoE.
Are we going to get those in the cherry bombs?
We are moving. We've got quite a few outdoor speakers now that are IP based.
Really?
Cherry bomb right now is not on the roadmap, but it's a possibility.
Because being red and sexy like that is awesome in its own right. Having network go to it, like outdoor audio just seems to be like this magic that I think a lot of people struggle with. 70-volt in general, once you start connecting it, it's not so one-to-one. People just, they don't understand how to do math anymore. And I understand that, it's complicated. But having something that's like, yeah, just run some network out there, like that just seems so, that's such an awesome solution. I didn't even realize that you guys are already doing that.
Well, I think so.
Yeah, it's so cool.
No, and as I said, resi's not quite there yet. The residential market isn't quite there yet, but in commercial, you know, it is. And so we're expanding out our line of indoors and outdoor speakers in the commercial line. And as resi, as I said, we're just showing it here as a concept to, you know, just show you where we think things are going to be going in the future in houses. And once it starts getting there, then we'll start developing more and more products for it.
Do you have it in Soundtube? You guys do so many things. There's so many products and so many different markets. But, you know, just to bring up another product, Soundtube, like that's hugely successful. It's been, you know, the who's who has one of those on the commercial site. So is it there already? Maybe I don't know, and it's there.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the fastest growing areas of our commercial business is IP-based speakers.
Wow.
So, we're a speaker company and we're making network switches now.
It's
So,
crazy.
you got to get into, you got to stay ahead. It's like I said before, you got to lead. And so we're doing it.
So there's more speaker companies now than ever in our history. What questions should people be asking? Whether you're an integrator or an end user, what should they be asking about their speaker company and about their speakers? And what is different about what you do compared to what the other manufacturers do?
Well, I think, from the standpoint of home theaters, that's a good example of something where you could be asking questions that will ultimately help build better systems for your customers. And one of the big ones is when you're building a system, even if you have the same brand of speakers, if they're not the same models, you really need to know that they're going to match up in both frequency and phase. And so that's a question to ask. Do these speakers match up? And there's a lot of really good manufacturers out there, and I'm sure they do, but maybe, they need to, they're not letting the customer know, and maybe they are. But that's a good question to ask. Because in a theater you have to have cohesiveness, or sound is not going to seamlessly go around the room. So, that's a good question to ask. And there's so many, as you said, brands out there, and there's so many people making really, really good product. I'm not even sure at this point what else to ask them. Just, again, there's a lot of good brands out there.
I know for me, hearing them was definitely one of those things that made me a believer. And hearing Darts here was so cool and so dynamic. And you heard everything. I think it was crazy because I remember at CEDIA, you guys brought that box. And it was like, the joke was too good. I don't think anyone got how awesome it was. Like, it's almost like you guys should have explained it a little more, because everybody went in and out. They were like, yeah, the room sounds so good. I'm like, you not understand? Like, you understand what you just said? You know where you just walked in? You know what you just said? And no one got it. It was like there should have been like a neon sign to say, look at where you are and how awesome it sounds.
Yeah, look what you just walked into.
It's not supposed to sound so good.
So what they're referring to is at one of the CEDIA shows, we brought basically a container that you would ship stuff around the world in. Probably the worst acoustic thing you could possibly have, and we put a darts theater in it. And people just forgot they were sitting in this container. It was, it just sounded so good.
It was perfect.
And it had minimal room treatments in it, and it was mainly the calibration system that made it sound good. And walking around the show, when people said, so, walk up and say, so do you have a live demo? And I would say, yeah, we do. We have a live demo of the container. And then they'd go, oh, that's you guys? Everyone knew what the container was.
No, it was awesome. Awesome. And they were, even if you compared it with, there's some heavy hitters at these shows. And the Dart system would compare, if we go against price points, we could price it against things multiples more, but acoustically didn't sound like, or no, they didn't sound better. They were worse, so there was no value there. So I got to admit, Darts. Now, when you see Phase Tech, and it's almost like I wish I heard Phase Tech more than the average, because it's hard to understand the two brands because they both sound so awesome. Now, where do you think Phase Tech kind of sits? Like, which one is better, Darts, Phase Tech?
Well, Darts was really our first total solution for audio. So the Dart speakers were always meant to be, matched up to the amplifier, meant to be active speakers, no passive components in it at all. Really the best that we possibly could do since we developed it. And we're on our fourth generation of it now. So it was always meant to be a match system that was predictable, something that once you got into the room, you could use our calibration package and bring it back to what we call our anechoic response in any room. PhaseTech, PC, and CI, you know, same great sound, play pretty much as loud, go pretty much as deep, but also our matched systems now. So you can be comfortable that the center channel, left and right speakers, and surround speakers are all going to match up and, you know, give you a seamless envelopment of sound in a home theater. But because they don't have the amplifiers, it's not a totally dedicated system. They're not brought into our anechoic chamber and calibrated to 0.5 dB. They cost a little less. But from a performance standpoint, they sound fantastic.
Wow. It's great.
We're going to wrap up our live portion of this now, and we got some more people that just came in, so we're going to do some demos in the theater, and we're going to shoot some videos that we'll be posting up on YouTube later on.
So before everyone goes, one thing I'll just tell them, you know, we brought something new. You know, Mike was asking about what do you have that's new, and we did bring one thing new that we're just beginning to ship, and that's a floor-to-ceiling linear subwoofer. People don't think of subwoofers as linear arrays, but this is a floor-to-ceiling linear array subwoofer that goes down to, is pretty much flat to 16 hertz. Goes deeper than that, but it's pretty much flat to 16 hertz. And so it's quite impactful. So we're showing that here.
Thanks everybody who logged in. We really appreciate it.
Yep, appreciate it.
Edit this and put it back up on YouTube and send it out to all our dealers. And Ken, as always, thank you.
Well, I appreciate you giving me the time, and appreciate, you know, everyone coming and listening and
learning experience, watching you do what you do. Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
We'll see you soon.
All right, bye-bye.